cards in it. It does not. Hey guys, this is Gamer Cow. Welcome to another Pokemon trading card game history video. We're on to our second last history set here, Shrouded Fable, and I don't really like this set. I don't think it's necessarily the set's fault. I just think that a couple of cards in here, namely this one, has kind of made a rather nasty change in the meta that just does not gel with me whatsoever. So yeah, it's weird. Despite this being a side set, there's actually a huge amount of playables in here, or at least interesting cards worth talking about. So that's why we're doing it as a separate thing. It normally would be like merged into Twilight Masquerade and such, but it's its own separate page on Limitless, which like no other side set is, and it's kind of neat for that reason. So figured we'd do it separate. There's some really cool art rare stuff in here, as we usually see, like the loyal 3 from the previous set. The single prize ones have all got stuff in here, as well as the multi-prize ones that we see in this set now. And Pecharunt had been officially set up in the video games as well, so we do have access to that as well. The exception is this guy, depending on exactly when you play this metagame. The single prize Pecharunt here initially came out as a promo card that wasn't released in Japan before the World Championships. As a result, it is not legal if you are playing the Worlds format strictly, but it would be legal if you played the Baltimore Regional Championship. And that actually had a deck with this card in it. It was the cloth deck. So it depends exactly when you want to put it down. I'm going to talk about it here because it is an interesting enough card, but yeah, your mileage may vary. It depends exactly what format you want to speak on. So yeah, despite only having about 100 new cards, there's roughly 30 of them which are worth talking about, whether it's for the main meta or for off meta slash, I don't even know with draft at this point. I haven't quite gotten all the way through my own personal draft right now to see. I'm like Paradox Rift at the time of recording this, and there's a full power Goldengo deck going on in that right now, or basically full power, so I don't even know at this point what would be good, but I think some of these do have some potential though, so we can talk about them as we go. For the main stuff, yeah, Pheasantipity is probably, I want to say, the biggest mistake that this one has. There are two big mistakes here. It's this card and the Dusclops Dustawa, but this I think has been the major contributor to decks going in a very wrong direction for me personally. Pheasantipity EX is a 210 HP Dark type EX, and it has an attack which very, very occasionally comes up if you've got some energy acceleration that could like fuel it. Cruel Arrow for any free energy snipes 100 anywhere on the opponent's board, so it can be kind of okay to like snip around the regular control type stuff. You do have to watch out for the Terra rule, obviously, but not every Pokemon is a Terra Pokemon, so you can kind of get around stuff there. But it's all about flip the script with this thing, and it's an ability we've seen before that wasn't nearly this problematic. If any of your Pokemon were KO'd during the opponent's last turn by any means, you can draw 3 cards once per turn. It's a hard once per turn, which is rare for Pokemon, but I don't know, this card just has seemed to like force every single deck to be almost supporterless, using like Mew and this and Squawk and like a lot of dumb stuff just to draw the cards that they need, and Pokestop especially kind of just ends up making everything sort of turbo based, and if you're not that, you lose, or you're like a stage 2 that doesn't necessarily die in one hit to everything, or you know, whatnot. It's just really stupid, and like every single deck plays this. I don't actually think there is a single successful list at the moment that doesn't play this card, because the fact is it makes you like Iono proof just about as well, because you're drawing 3 cards after the opponent has Iono'd you down to like nothing. It's just it's so stupid. I can't stand this, I'll be honest with you. And it's weird because we had Oricorio GX that didn't do nearly as much as this card did, even though it was basically exactly the same. I don't really know what to say with that. It's just a very silly card to have around. Pecharunt EX is a fair bit more interesting at the very least. This one has a couple of neat decks that it can go into. It's only 190 HP on this EX, but it has the Subjugating Chains ability, which lets you switch one of your benched Dart Pokemon, except Pecharunt EX, with your active. If you do that, the new active you bring in is poisoned. That's one of the main sort of like power bases of your Loyal Free. So it's kind of cool. It's also got an attack as well if you're using Darkness Energy. For 2 Darks, it does 60 for each prize the opponent has taken, so it can, at the end of the game, actually score some pretty sizable KOs too. So if you are running a Darkness deck with the Loyal Free stuff in here, this can be pretty good. It can also be used in Charizard, because Charizard itself is a Dart type, right? You wouldn't be able to attack with a Pecharunt in that deck, but it gives you another way of making control much less powerful against you. And there is a reason to be poisoned as well that's beneficial, so we'll get to that in the trainer section. Dusclops and Dusknoir, these are also like a big mistake. When these were revealed, I think my initial reaction was, oh god, why are we doing this sort of thing again? We have had this kind of effect before, but not nearly as powerful as this. Dusclops, if it's you can knock it out during the turn, and if you do that, you put 5 damage counters on one of the opponent's Pokemon. Dusknoir can do the same thing, but put 13 damage counters down instead. This is incredibly powerful for many reasons. The first off is that you can use these to obviously math fix, so you can score the particular knockout that you want. These damage counters go anywhere, they do not get stopped by the Terra rule obviously, so you can finish off weakened things as well, which is, I guess, pretty useful. But also, you're forcing the opponent to take a prize card when you knock these out, which means that Countercatcher and any of the other behind tools, like going behind things, are live. Like in the next set, in like the newest set, Counter Gain would also be a thing, but like Charizard just does more damage than it would have before because you have made the opponent take a prize card. So they take an extra, not only do they take more damage off of these, but they also have, you know, additional damage on the Zard. Defiance Band buffs that as well. Iono ends up being much more powerful with this. You could Roxanne as well, actually, with much easier if you just make the opponent go, alright, take 2 prizes on your first dude, like, I don't know, a Fez or a Squawk or something like that. Dusknoir, take out something maybe, but put them down at 3 prizes. Suddenly you just rip them at 2 cards and like take out the draw engine or something, and what do they do from there, right? So lots of really stupid things this can do, and yeah, I don't know, it just seems like a mistake of card design, to be completely blunt with it. It really does not feel like a good card to have in the format whatsoever. So it's not the best thing, I think, at the moment that you can do. That's just how stupid the turbo decks are right now. But it certainly isn't a card that I want to see in my game, for sure. And we're going to have to put up with it for a very, very long time, too. This is H format, so yeah, this is going to be like until 2027, which is terrifying to think about. Haxorus is kind of neat for the Regidrago deck. There's 2 good tools for Regidrago in this one. Haxorus has a okay first attack. If the opponent's active has any special energy attached, they get automatically KO'd. Problem is, a lot of the time that's going to be a missed energy, and if they have a missed energy on, it prevents effects of attacks, so they don't get KO'd by this. But it's for Dragon Pulse that the Drago decks would tend to use it. 230 damage is that slightly awkward number. The Drago decks just have a hard time hitting, because they either have to use like Raging Bolt and discard 4 energy to get to the right sort of amount, or they use like a Giratina V-Star that does 280, but it does have a much more dangerous downside than this one. Discard the top 3 cards of your deck is not really that much of a pain point in Regidrago, and 230 instead of 200 like you would get from Rolling Iron or Dragapulse Phantom Dive attack. It's much more useful for picking off a lot of the bench sitters like Ogerpon or Pheasantipity. You just get to automatically snipe them, which is pretty good. The other tool that they got is Kieran. This is specifically an anti-Lost Box card, but most decks aren't going to play this because Lost Box is not really that amazing at this point. They're not really going to play it specifically for that. But if the opponent has any cards in their discard pile with Chorus in their name, there is one in this set as well, you can use Trifrost for a single colorless, which then for 2 metal, 2 water in a colorless normally, you discard all the energy from this Pokemon and snipe 110 3 times on 3 separate Pokemon. Granted, you can't use this on Terra Pokemon, but the big thing with this is that it absolutely destroys evolving decks, and if Regidrago can get this off on their first attack before the opponent has a chance to evolve, then the game is over. Like, there's not even any reason to keep playing that one. This card is not fun, for sure, but I guess it could be considered a necessary evil. I don't really know. We don't have a proper bench barrier in the Scarlet Violet block apart from like a stage 1, so this could snipe before that happens. I think we're really just relying on the Terra rule keeping this in check, but against the decks that play all the Terra Pokemon, you just don't attack with this, so I don't know. If this only took 1 metal, I'd probably be playing this with like Champala stuff, but it takes 2, that deck can't fuel it in 1 turn. Boohoo, etc., right? Pecharunt is also kind of interesting, the non-EX one this time round. It only has 80 HP, but if it's in the active spot, you put 5 more damage counters on the opponent's poison Pokemon between turns, which is really fun. This gets to be played alongside the Brute Bonnet and the very fun Ancient Booster Capsule that it tends to put on itself, and you can use this with Sneasler as well if you want. Technically, like Perilous Jungle, I think, is a card that comes out next set that increases poison damage as well, so long as you're not a Dark type, and you can realistically have like poison doing 10 damage counters in between turns with this. It's very silly. You might wonder what deck actually wants to have the status condition down. It's Cloth, naturally enough, so you get a lot of extra damage off of that, which will also count. We'll just do it here as well. It counts for the Binding Mochi as well. I've been teasing this one for a little bit. If you have a poison Pokemon in the active, it does 40 more damage to the opponent's active here, which is bonkers, to be honest with you. A plus 40 is, I think, higher than any individual card that we've seen for that you can play 4 of. There is an A-Spec, obviously, Maximum Belt that does extra, but nothing does just this much by itself. We don't have Choice Band in the format for like EXs and whatnot, so yeah, this is what allows the Charizard to play Pecharunt and gain benefits off of it too, because then Zard hits an extra 40, it can very easily get up to these like 300, 330 type numbers that KO other Charizards and whatnot too, so yeah. As far as the other trainers go, potentially the other mistake out of this set is Night Stretcher. This lets you put any Pokemon or any basic energy from your discard pile into your hand. And like, that doesn't sound like it should be a problem, and half the time it's not, but the real thing that makes this card problematic right now is Pokestop. So I think after rotation this card is going to feel a lot healthier, but right now Pokestop is a big part of these turbo engines, because Night Stretcher can pick up any of the Pokemon or the basic energy that you discard during the Pokestop. So it's like, oh no, I discarded my Regidrago V-Star. Well, I guess I'll just Night Stretcher it back. It's actually better for it to be in the discard, right? It's the old VS Seeker thing all over again. Sometimes it's better for your supporter card to be in the discard pile at that stage, so that you can pick it back up again. The Chorus supporter in this set is Chorus's Tenacity. This is a somewhat played card that lets you search your deck for a Stadium card and any energy card, puts them into the hand. This is pretty good for decks that specifically require like a special energy and Stadium of some description. Usually it's going to be something like Neo Upper Energy or maybe Legacy Energy that you would play with this. Like, being able to search Double Turbo is also pretty good. But if you don't need any of those, you're probably better playing other cards here. Yeah, it's like the Stadium is fun, but I don't know, it's a bit weird. But if you really need a specific Stadium, like this Neutralization Zone over here, maybe you still play Chorus's Tenacity anyway. Neutralization Zone is an ace-spec stadium that prevents all damage done to Pokemon without rule boxes from their enemies' EX and V mons. So it's kind of sick. It also can't be put back from the hand or deck into the from the discard pile, so you can't Silene this. It is a one-time thing. If the opponent can bounce this, then they are Gucci, right? They can still attack with whatever. It also doesn't prevent effects, so something like Roaring Moon would still get through. You need Mist Energy as well to kind of complement that, which is a bit of a shame. And it also doesn't have any inbuilt protection. So going back with Roaring Moon, or even Lugia V-Star, right? They can just automatically discard this. There's nothing stopping them from bouncing the stadium. Even Lost Vacuum is really good against this. So it's only really going to slow down some decks, or like stunt things that aren't playing Pokestop. That's basically it. But it's still very good. Some decks did try it at the start of the format here, particularly Gardevoir, because they play a lot of non-EX mons at this point, so yeah, they could use it quite well. 0-6 Machinations is also kind of nice for, you know, the worst kind of decks, to be honest. The opponent discards cards from their hand until they have 3 cards left. This one, it's like fine. It reads really, really scary, considering that most decks in Pokemon do not want any of the cards in their hand discarded. But the thing is, they get to keep the best 3 cards in their hand. You don't get to see the rest of their hand. We don't have anything that like combines with this too well in order to remove the rest of the hand. It's a very frustrating card, and it definitely is a big punish against decks like Lost Box or maybe Goldengo that tend to have massive hand sizes as they go through. But because they get to keep the best stuff, it's not even as good as Iono in a lot of situations as far as hand disruption goes. So, like, it's fine. You'll see it in the control list, but it's not actually that devastating. Last card I'm putting up here, and this is more of a speculative one for the very current card pool in Surging Sparks. Power Glass is a very interesting tool card. At the end of your turn after attacks have happened, if the Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active spot, you can attach a basic energy from your discard pile to it. This obviously works very well with anything that discards energy as part of its attack cost. Think the Raging Bolt at the moment, but also in the absolute current game in Surging Sparks, the new Terra Pikachu is probably a good example of something to use this with, or Slacking EX is the other one that will discard an energy. This can pick it back up, so there will be some decks that play that too. Anything that discards off of itself to attack could potentially use this, or if you can do some really turbo stuff turn 1, you might be able to stick this in the active as you do a like setup move or something, and then get an extra energy and play that way. The energy is a bit vulnerable though, that's the main disadvantage to it. Now for the off-meta stuff, there's a couple of really fun ones in here. I want to first mention the Blood Moon Ursaluna because this will actually be getting played this round. And it's also kind of cool. It's very similar to Galarian Zapdos from before. It's a 150 HP Pokemon this time. It's got a 4 energy retreat cost too. It's a big boy. If you play it from your hand to your bench during your turn, you can attach up to 2 basic fighting energy from your hand to this Pokemon. So basically the same thing as the Galarian Zapdos and the other bird trio from for their respective types as well. But this one actually has a good attack this time, kind of like the Moltres did actually. 2 fighting in the colors to do 100 plus 30 for each damage counter on the opponent's active Pokemon. So the deck is this with Iron Valiant in order to put damage counters down. Jet Energy can fuel the last part and provide an extra switch as well, so you can get the Blood Moon into play immediately. And with Lana's, I forget the exact thing for it, but like the Lana card from last set that lets you recover free Pokemon and or energy, basic energy from your discard pile, so long as they don't have rule boxes. Use that as well in order to pick this back up with 2 energy, put it back on the bench, jet energy, and then there's your attacker again. It's kind of very fun deck to see in motion, so long as it doesn't brick, which good luck with that in this format. So that's one of the most fun ones in here. There is Genesect as well, which is potentially playable. It allows you to nullify the opponent's A-specs if it has a tool attached to it. They just simply cannot play the A-spec. Unfortunately, I think this is just a little bit too situational. This is certainly not a Garbodor, so it doesn't seem that good, to be honest. And then the other weird one is Academy at Night. This lets you put a card, like the turn player, put a card from their hand on top of their deck. So you can like Iono-proof yourself a little bit. It is a -1, but like that can be perfectly fine. Sometimes you want your top deck to be a specific card so that you can do bonus effects. Think if you had like a Macargo or something like that with Eruption, that could be pretty useful. And sometimes you really have bricks that you need to put back into your deck because your deck is bad, like Palafin. But you know, who would ever play that, right? Yeah, I'm totally playing that this round, so there you go. As far as the rest of the stuff goes here, Monkidori EX seems like an interesting card because of the other poison-based support and stuff we have in here. It's a 210 HP Darkness type EX, and it has the Dirty Headbutt attack, which is pretty silly. 190 damage for 2 Dark and a Colorless. You can't use it in consecutive turns. Seems kind of bad, but we do have good acceleration to go with, and of course the Binding Mochi can let you improve the attack power of this as well. But its claim to fame is the "Oh no you don't" ability here, which is a very fun one. If it is damaged from an attack by the opponent's Pokemon, and you have a Pecharunt EX in play, the opponent only takes 1 prize card for this. Strictly speaking, they take 1 fewer. If they did Iron Hands Ampy very much on it, they would still take 2. But yeah, this lets you give up fewer prize cards and still effectively playing an EX. It's an interesting theory, and there probably is a reasonable enough deck that you could play it with. Being a Dark type means it's got Dark Patch and everything going for it, but like literally why are we playing this instead of Roaring Moon would be the real question. I don't know. Maybe the lack of a grass weakness, but I think fighting is a worse weakness to have. Considering Miraidon is still good, fighting types are still pretty respectable, so I'm not really sure exactly what we want to do with this thing, but it's respectable enough, I suppose. Yeah, that's about the best I can say. Okidogi EX is supposed to work with all this poison synergy stuff because it has the Chain Crazed attack. For 2 Darkness and a Colorless, it does 130, double that to 260 if it is poisoned, so this is your big payoff card, right? If you play this with the Binding Mochi, you would get to 300 damage, which is a lot of damage on these big basic bunguses, right? The thing is, you are self-poisoning, so your big 250 HP goes down quite considerably, and it's just a lot of energy to keep getting up and running here. It's not every deck even dies to this, right? Like Charizard doesn't care, so it's a bit rough, to be honest. Poison Musculature is supposed to be your early game setup attack, but I think if you do this, you just die, basically. For a single Colorless, you search your deck for up to 2 basic Darkness, attach them to this Pokemon, which leaves it in the active, then if you attached any energy this way, they poison this guy, which means you don't even have as much HP as you would have either. So I don't really like this first attack. I could see some situations where it's okay, but most of the time the opponent's going to be able to attack through it, probably take a knockout because you have already self-damaged yourself way too much. Slitherwing is a pretty interesting anti-Iron Hands card. It's a 140 HP basic ancient Pokemon, which is the fighting type. That's the main reason it's useful. And for fighting in the Colorless, it does 20 plus 120 more if the opponent has any future Pokemon in play. Add the weakness to this, it's 280, so that KOs even a Bravery Charmed Iron Hands, if you ever see one of those. Very rare specimen, but it could happen. And yeah, it's good at its job, right? Funnily enough, the Ancient Box deck doesn't actually have a relevant like fighting type that it would use. There is the other Slitherwing, but it also does a ton of damage to itself. So most of the time, this is going to be your relevant fighting type attacker in that deck. So single prize Ancient Box gets a little bit better against hands with this card. Cresselia is kind of cute. It's a pretty good throwback to the Gallade from Secret Wonders. It has only 120 HP, which is a little bit annoying, but it's fine, I suppose. For 3 color Psychic Energy, you do 80 damage, and if you turn one of your face down prizes face up, you do 80 more damage. You do have to keep that prize face up for the rest of the game. Most of the time you would be taking that prize, but if you don't want that card at the time, well, you can't like put it back face down, so sucks to be you, I suppose. It's kind of cool though. 160 damage is reasonable. I think this is much more of a draft card than an actual meta card, because Guardi probably doesn't need this. Psychic is a bad weakness to hit right now. There's like nothing that is weak to Psychic, so you don't really care about that part, and only 160 isn't even two-shotting the stage 2s, so I don't know, man. It's like okay, but I think it's much better in a single prize arena, which is at least a little bit more likely to happen in draft. So yeah, there is that. Zoroark is supposed to be a good anti-EX card, but it's too easy to play around this kind of attack, unfortunately. For double turbo energy, you do 60 for each of your opponent's EX and V Pokemon in play. And that's like kinda cool, I suppose. Obviously if you double turbo this, it's 20 less than that. But like, think how much you've got to do in order for this to be hitting reasonable numbers, right? The opponent needs 4 of these types of Pokemon in play in order for it to hit 240. And that is assuming that you don't have double turbo as your power up here. That's the bare minimum to KO Raging Bolt. Anything bulkier than that is going to take way more, and like Charizard EX does not have to have 4 in play, right? And if this is only doing 180, then it's like trading at best. It could be like passable, but it's certainly not good enough to justify being a stage 1 with like this lower HP total. The game is far too fast for this kind of thing right now, so unfortunate. I want to note the Joltik and Galvantula mostly because they're grass types, especially the Joltik. This is for GLC quite a good pickup. It's the first grass type Joltik we've ever had, and GLC is a mono type format, so you are not allowed to play the electric type Joltik in order to play the dual type Galvantula, the electric grass one from Fates Collide, in grass type decks before. And you might want to play that one because it does do some sniping that does apply weakness, so that could be kind of neat. As far as the Galvantula itself goes, it's like passable. If the opponent's Pokemon in the active spot has an ability, it does 50 extra damage, which it really needs because it only does 130 for like a Grass Lightning on its cost here. Like, this could be an okay reversal energy card in draft. Oops. Because we do get to hit like a good weakness. It's a Charizard killer, right? So like maybe in draft, if you absolutely need that sort of thing and you've got reversal energy to spare, this could be like okay. And like 180 is fine enough numbers into other single prize stuff. So like yeah, it's passable, I suppose. Dartrix is only getting noted because it has United Wings, and it is a grass type, obviously. There's the thing the deck needs to beat Charizard, right? It's not, but like, that's what some people would have thought when this came out, at least. It's like, well, now we have 16 Pokemon with United Wings, we can get a little bit more damage out of it, and also kill Charizard. But, yeah, that wasn't the deck's problem. The numbers were not necessarily the issue. It's everything else around it. So, yeah. Decidueye, on the other hand, may actually be like somewhat okay for draft because it does do 170 for a single energy, and if you have the EX Decidueye, you do like you would enjoy playing the EX Decidueye because it's got some decent mobility options on it. It like switches itself in or out of the active spot once per turn. So, like, you might be okay with this. 170 KOs, like, the non-EX stuff, right? And it also kills Charizard, woo! So, like, you know, again, if you are desperate for Charizard outs, then maybe this could be okay. We do have the bug-catching set from Twilight Masquerade, so there's, like, consistency for this as well. The fact that it's only a single energy is the thing that makes this, like, worth even talking about. Copperajah, I don't think is particularly great, but I do want to note it specifically because there's an EX one, and like Metang, if you manage to pull enough of it in draft, is a pretty good acceleration engine, and this dude is big. 200 HP single prizer is absolutely huge. Not Defiance Band, the Rigid Band from 151 would get this to be even bigger, and it can do 230 damage in a deck that accelerates a bunch of energy. The opponent also can't play stadiums, so maybe you could lock neutralization zone in play. That'd be funny. I'd laugh if somebody did that, so that's gotta count for something, right? Revivroom has had like 3 or 4 different like reasonable cards at this point. There is a different EX which is like multi-tool attaching. This one is a lightning terror, so you might be able to hit a different weakness in your metal deck, and it hits 140 damage if it moved from bench to active, so for a single energy that's pretty respectable. If it's taken damage and you can get enough energy on this thing as well, Shattering Speed could also be okay. Does a pretty respectable 250 and discards itself. So it doesn't KO itself, the opponent doesn't take prizes for it, so you might be able to blank an attack with this, which is kind of fun. Then we have Dangerous Laser. I'm pretty sure I've seen this in a stupid meme deck at some point from Mahone, which would not surprise me, to be honest. It is an ace-spec that burns and confuses the opponent's active. Whoop-de-frickin-do is my response to that, but I'm pretty sure I've seen it in the meme deck, and maybe if you somehow haven't pulled an ace-spec in draft right now, this might be the one you have to play. I am so sorry for your loss if that's the case, but hey. Then we have Janine's Secret Art. A lot of people were really excited for this one, and I could see why, but it feels really slow, unfortunately. You choose up to 2 of your Darkness Pokemon, and for each of them, search your deck for a basic Darkness energy and attach it to that Pokemon. If you attach to the active, it does poison it. So the idea, of course, is to use it with all of the synergy stuff, like the Okidogi Monkey Dory, all of that fun things, and then like Binding Mochi as well is the obvious combo for it. But it's just too slow. Like, this doesn't draw you stuff, it doesn't get you any additional sort of help for the deck here, and like in standard we have Dart Patch, which is a card that just like does this but better, so what are we even doing with this, right? That's the real problem with it. It's like, what are we actually doing for it? I think it also basically gets outclassed by Crispin next set, if I'm being real. Crispin's got different use cases for sure, but like for the most part Crispin does the acceleration better. In draft, I think there is a reasonable shot, because we would get quite a lot of this set, and we don't have Dart Patch in draft, so I think there might actually be something if you can pull enough of the good Darkness type stuff from in here. But I don't know, man. This is such a weird one to speak on. And that's basically the set, but like, when you consider how many cards we've sort of spoken about for the the density of this set is insane. I can kind of see why it does have its own separate thing on Limitless, considering it does actually have a couple of different tournaments to its name, and unlike, say, Pokemon Go, which, yes, it had a couple of good cards, this one had a lot more going for it, and yeah, I'm definitely in agreement that this one should have been split. Does make it a lot harder to play decks out of, though, so I don't know if it's going to actually make an interesting video for the recording, but we will have to just find out as we play. Thank you very much for listening. If you have found this interesting, well, I do appreciate it. And yeah, next time, Shrouded Fable Battle Time. We're like 1 or 2 sets away from being where we want to be to end everything.